Act 4, Scene 3, which no longer has anything to do with any of the numbering in the book and is just where we are. The deadline for choosing an academic team was the Tuesday following the winter holiday. The other homeroom teachers were ready by Thanksgiving. They held many contests in their classrooms and had selected the winners of those. They had ready answers for anyone who asked how they had chosen their teams. In the teacher's lounge, Mrs. Sharkey, who taught 6th grade math, accused Mrs. Olinski of being dictatorial, and Mrs. Massolino, who taught music and didn't have a homeroom at all, hinted that she was lazy. Mrs. Olinski did not take kindly to these remarks. Her voice quavering, she answered her critics. "I have my reasons," she said, even though she knew she didn't. Something stronger than reason was having its way with her, and she didn't know what that was either. Mrs. Lawrenson, Epiphany Middle School principal, called Mrs. Olinski into the office one day and quietly warned her that she'd better have a good answer for the parents of any high honor roll student who didn't make her team. Mrs. Olinski said, "By the time they get to 6th grade, honor roll students won't risk making a mistake. And sometimes to be successful, you have to risk making mistakes." Mrs. Lawrenson agreed with her, but warned that that would not be a very popular reason. Furthermore, Mrs. Olinski added, "Sometimes we even have to risk making fools of ourselves." Mrs. Lawrenson never approved of that answer either. Even though Mrs. Olinski could not tell why, she could tell when she decided not to hold tryouts. It was on a Saturday in late October, sometime after 4 o'clock. She had been correcting social studies papers and had just finished reading Noah Gersham's essay on the First Amendment when the thought flew into her head. She would appoint her team, the way the president appointed his cabinet. She made her decision, just like that. She chose Noah right away, and almost immediately after, she thought of Nadia and Ethan. They looked like strong candidates. She would watch them and see. In the weeks that followed, she became more convinced of their being right for the job. She had not yet officially notified any of them because she wanted to make all 4 appointments at the same time, and the 4th was causing problems. She had been considering asking Hamilton Knapp. Yes, that Hamilton Knapp. Although he was naughty, he was also smart, and bad boys had always held a certain charm for her. But each time something told her he was the right choice, something else told her he was wrong. So she held back. While she waffled between asking him and not asking him, she never gave a thought to asking Julian Singh. He was smart, or else his English accent made him seem so. And he was sophisticated, or else his English accent made him seem so. But Julian Singh was too far off the mainland. He was an island unto himself, definitely not a team player. Ham Knapp was a leader. Ham Knapp had friends. But Julian stood alone, just as he had stood alone the first day of school at the blackboard in front of the word cripple. On the day that Epiphany Middle School was invited to attend Annie, Mrs. Olinski had driven her bus to the high school and had arrived ahead of the school bus. She waited at the foot of the steps as the kids filed out. She saw Julian Singh push his way forward and then scurry down the steps and out of sight. He had disappeared into thin air. She didn't want to call into thin air and look to all the world and the other teachers as if she had no control of her class. Mrs. Olinski was annoyed with Julian Singh. Once inside the auditorium, she had looked for him again, but had been unable to spot him before the house lights dimmed and the show got underway. Then Sandy appeared on stage, and the clapping and the chanting, "Arf, arf, arf," had started in the section of the auditorium where her class was seated. From where she had been sitting, in a handicapped space by the exit, she could not see who had started it, but she knew one of her students was responsible. She knew it, and she was angry. Mrs. Olinski had a great tolerance for mischief, but she had no patience for malice. This was not mischief. There is a playful quality to mischief. This was malice. There is a mean quality to malice, and someone in her class was terribly mean. When the lights went on and Mrs. Reynolds stormed on stage to scold the audience, Mrs. Olinski was able to wheel herself around to examine her students. With a sick feeling in her stomach, she scanned them one by one. Like the cursor on a computer screen, her eyes moved from the first row to the second, and then stopped. Her pulse quickened. She knew. She had no proof, never would have proof, but she knew. She knew who had started the ruckus. And she knew then that she would not and could not ask Hamilton Knapp to be the 4th member of the team. And that is when she went to tea at Sillington House. Margaret Draper Diamondstein must have been waiting at the window. No sooner had Mrs. Olinski stopped her van than her old friend came rushing out the door. She was wearing a jogging suit but no coat. The wind was whipping off the lake, and she hugged her upper arms and stamped her feet as she waited for the door to open. Margie Diamondstein reached up into the van, and Eva Marie Olinski reached down out of it, and they hugged. Then a voice said, "Hi, Grandma." It was Ethan. Margaret asked, "Ethan, is that you?" "Yeah, me. Ethan." "Come on down out of that van and let me see you," she said. Ethan stood in front of her, looking enchantingly awkward until Margaret pulled him to her. Eva Marie Olinski saw his arms hanging limply at his side, his wrists hanging below his cuffs like meter sticks, showing how much he had grown since the jacket was new. Ethan slowly lifted his arms and fit them around his grandmother's waist as she rested her chin on top of his head. She closed her eyes and absorbed the blonde, waxy smell of his hair before she stood him at arm's length. "You've grown since summer," she said. "I have. I know," he answered and shot his arms out of his sleeves, showing several inches bare above the wrist bones. "Would you believe only a month ago these covered my fingertips?" Margaret laughed and said, "No, Ethan, I would not believe. Just testing." Nadia waited until they had backed away from each other before saying, "Hello, Margaret." "Nadia," Margaret said. "What a surprise. Is Eva Marie, Mrs. Olinski, your teacher too?" Nadia replied, "Yes, Margaret, she is." At that moment, a slender man with heavy gray eyebrows came out of Sillington House, holding his knuckles to his hips as he looked over the scene. He saw Nadia and sprinted over, calling, "Nadia! Nadia!" He hugged her close and then kissed the top of her head several times until Ginger wedged her way between them. "I had no idea I'd see you this afternoon," Nadia said. "Ginger is a star, Grandpa. She is excellent." Her grandfather replied, "I have no doubt about that. After all, Ginger is a genius, and we're going to see her tomorrow night. We're all going. We're going with your mother." "I know," Nadia said, looking very pleased. "I know." Eva Marie Olinski watched Margaret Draper Diamondstein hug her grandson. The new Mrs. Diamondstein was dressed in a jogging suit, a turquoise jogging suit. Turquoise! She'd always regarded the color turquoise, like shocking pink and chartreuse, as the color equivalent of the word ain't. Quaint when seldom used, but vulgar in great doses. As she watched Margaret hug her grandchild and Izzy hug his, her mental sensors and customary good manners started shutting down. She could not stand it another minute. She was on the verge of screaming with pain and rage when she felt her wheelchair begin to move. She felt herself being pushed toward the front porch of Sillington House. Eva Marie Olinski was so blinded by jealousy that she had not noticed Mr. Singh come out. From behind her chair, his voice floated down upon her in soft waves. "I have prepared a tea," he said. "A tea?" she thought. Yes, a tea. It was that time of day. It was 4:00. "The others will join us shortly." Eva Marie Olinski turned around and at eye level saw a long blue apron. Her eyes traveled upwards and saw a black beard, a broad white smile, a pair of amber eyes, a white turban. Saved by a genie, she thought. Mr. Singh maneuvered her wheelchair to a table in the back of the dining room. Without asking, he ceremoniously poured tea into a delicate china cup. "Cream?" "No." "Sugar?" "No." "Yes, it's best to drink tea without." And she did. She drank unhurriedly. Before her cup was empty, she felt something lift from her shoulders. Was it jealousy or injury? Was it anger? Was it all of the above? She replaced her emptied cup in its saucer. She waited. She was calm. Margie and Izzy joined her at the table, and she drank another cup of tea and ate a cucumber sandwich, taking 4 bites out of a patch of bread so trim she could have swallowed it whole. She hardly heard what Margaret and Izzy were saying. She didn't interrupt. And as soon as she was listening, first out of politeness, for courtesy was the first of her civilized senses to return, and then out of interest, genuine interest. She looked around the room and saw the 4 children, Ethan, Noah, Nadia, and Julian, sitting at a table on the far side of the room. They were talking amongst themselves and drinking tea. They didn't interrupt one another, Mrs. Olinski thought. How unusual. There were nods and smiles and obvious pleasure in one another's company. Mrs. Olinski thought, how unusual to find 4 sixth graders who listened to one another sympathetically, unselfishly. How curious. How courteous. Mrs. Olinski thought, when people come to tea, they are courteous. She thought, I believe in courtesy. It is the way we avoid hurting people's feelings. She thought that maybe, just maybe, Western civilization was in a decline because people did not take time to take tea at 4 o'clock. The souls continued their animated conversation when suddenly, as if on signal, the 4 of them looked back at Mrs. Olinski. And that is when she knew. That is the exact moment she knew that Julian Singh would be the 4th member of her team, and that she would always give good answers when asked why she had chosen them. And then and there, she also knew that someday she would drink another cup of slow tea at Sillington House.